I think we are good on time. So hello and welcome everyone. I'm going to be the chair for this interesting and a talk from two Googlers today. So a little bit about me. I'm Nabila Rahman from Austin, Texas. I am the senior technical lead for company named Poly, previously Plantronics and Polycom, and I work on the cloud solutions team. With that, I'm going to introduce the speakers today. First one, Arpita Kumar. She's a senior content strategist from Google Assistant's personality at Google, and Nikki Lee, lead education evaluation assessment and research at Google. And the topic is switching to tech, why and how. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it, and I'm giving it over to the speakers. Thank you.
Totally. So one thing is just a point of order. I'm going to keep the chat open and keep an eye on that. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them in. And Arpita and I really intentionally decided to keep this conversation super, super casual. And we didn't want to do a formal moderated talk. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it a conversation between two people who were just introduced, but really hit it off. And like, I thought Arpita was one of the funniest, most interesting people I had ever met, and want to keep this conversation. Stop it! It's true. I'm not making stuff up. And like, just keep this conversation like open and free flowing, and really see what was interesting to you all. So, we do encourage you all to ask questions, and to, if you want, turn on your cameras, and to do that. So we're really excited to talk to everybody, and do that. So I'm going to start by asking Arpita, what were you doing before you came to Google?
Cool. So just so a little bit of setup of what I'm doing now, so that it kind of makes sense when I tie it up later. So I'm a senior content strategist for the Google Assistant's personality. What this means is that every time you interact with that disembodied voice on your Pixel phone or the Google Home, and you ask it things like, oh, what do you look like? Or can you sing me a song? That's everything that I have written or developed. So if you notice that the Google Assistant has like a character or a personality, that's what I write and develop. And
so like when I ask it to tell me a joke?
Yeah, so those are some of the jokes either like I've written or we have a team, so as the team we have like come up with something. So that's like my role. And so how before this I used to write for film and TV, and I used to develop characters for film and TV. So I used to write and direct. And I think one of the biggest, like, I was thinking about like how did my journey end up at Google. And I think it has to do with the fact that we as human beings, it's the function of our mind to tell stories or build narratives around everything, even when we don't want to do it. So it's like that's why, like, we anthropomorphize like inanimate objects. People have pet rocks or name their cars. Like that's just a function of the human mind. And somehow, like, it's like how kind of like we build communities, we build our culture, we build our society is through storytelling, oral storytelling or written storytelling. It's been done forever, and now it's kind of like a big part of tech too, that kind of tech recognizes that, where even if like Google had not made a personality for the AI, not having a personality itself is a personality, and that users would build a story around that. And so Google recognized that, and it needed writers from like film, TV, or other backgrounds, people who do that in their everyday, who had experience doing it, to create that character for their artificial intelligence. So that's how, like, it made a space for many people who my background is in film, is in like directing cinema and writing for TV, and I studied that in school. I went to film school as well, and that's how sort of like storytelling made its way into the tech world and created a space for me. So that's how I ended up here.
No. I want to hear the name drop. I want to hear the name drop of the people you worked with before you got here.
So yeah, right before I joined Google, I was writing for Issa Rae, and before that, I was making films that were on PBS and stuff. So
That is so
yeah.
so cool. So like what is the actual mechanics of transitioning in? Like, did you get a phone call or did you apply? How did that work?
I did not apply. I got an email that I thought was spam because it was like Google was interested in like the work they the work that I was doing, and I was like, what does that even mean? And then that they were like they were building like they were building these characters for AI, and they wanted me to write for it, and I like didn't understand what any of it meant, so I didn't respond to that email thinking it was spam. And then a second one came with a phone number and a time if I was available during that time. And so once I got on that call, was that recruiter was awesome, and the hiring process was very informative, and I started realizing a lot of what I had done in my previous experiences or the jobs I had had kind of could not necessarily like were a direct translation or like were a direct fit, but had prepared me to be able to like kind of figure out this new. And it was actually, it's like a space that's so new. It's like we say flying we're flying the plane as we are building it. So having done that in independent filmmaking, where there's anything that can ever go wrong will go wrong when you're making a film or you're writing for TV. So it's like prepared you for this world where also there's nothing set, and you're just like figuring everything out as you go. So yeah. And Nikki, tell me about your journey.
Well, I mean, mine is a little topsy-turvy. Like, it's emotionally turbulent to how I got here. But so I was teaching, and I loved my career as a teacher. I was teaching at a project-based learning STEM charter school that I actually attended myself at one point. And I was teaching art history. I was coming home covered in paint, and doing some really interesting things. So like as the students were learning about like the Revolutionary War and learning about revolutions, I was teaching them about protest art and like the role of protest art in and how that advanced revolutions, and then like handing a bunch of seventh graders spray cans, like like to make art, and administration loved me and doing that. But that didn't pay the bills because I was dating a guy who was in med school at the time, because that's a really great idea. And he was like, yeah, you drop out of school, because I was in college at the time as well. You drop out of school and get a full, a better paying job, and pay for me to go to med school. And then when I become a doctor, you can go back to school. So I was like, sure, totally, that's a great idea. And I did. And so I got a job answering phones and selling travel insurance. Thank you for calling. This is Nikki. How may I help you today? And selling travel insurance on the phone and scaring people into buying travel insurance. Now, to be fair, I still buy travel insurance every day. Like every time I travel, I buy travel insurance.
Every day?
Oh yeah, no, yes, during a pandemic, because I'm traveling all the time. But it was terrible. I hated my job. It was awful. So I transferred into the marketing department, but because I had a background in very light like HTML and CSS coding, because I was at this STEM charter school, they put me in charge of their email marketing and their that like buying pay-per-click ads. I was like, well, if I'm gonna do this, I'm at least gonna try and make a little like money doing it. Like, which ad is better than this ad, which ad is better than this ad. And I started learning about like analytics and data analytics. And so I was slowly improving, like, oh, if I write the ad this way and I use more creative marketing this way, I can spend more money or save money and do that and slowly improve that. And so I grew my knowledge in statistics and data and grew it that way. And then I went to an ad agency and started making mobile apps. I was doing this before smartphones. And then so started making mobile apps and learning about it all on the job, and slowly transitioned. Then I went to Union Bank and helped them design their first mobile app, and slowly made my way more and more into the tech industry. But by the time I got to Google, there was an opening for this position on this team to work in the education space, but for a tech company, and really merge my true love with like education and what I was doing was like business intelligence and data. So now I run the education evaluation assessment and research team, where I work with teams to understand like how do we know whether or not people are learning what we are actually trying to teach them and measuring that. So doing some like really advanced stuff, and like we're spending all this time and money on like online learning, and how do we know that that's effective? So like triangulating data with like self-report versus like eye drift, like like eye tracking and eye drift, and then like EEG data, like brain waves, to track like attentional drift, and doing research that way. And then I'm also the head of machine learning and responsible engineering education at Google. So like really getting deep into the AI ethics space, and like how do I teach people to actually care and give a crap about like the ethics of how what we're doing affects people back in the community. Because I don't know, I'm the only manager of color and the only woman of color in my little area, and I have a responsibility to do this. So I really am putting an effort into how do I teach people about this in my little space. So, I mean, I started off doing, trying to sell and scare old people who are booking their vacations to a travel agent on the phone. I started there, but like kept like transitioning and learning a little bit more and twisting and turning and twisting and turning till I got to Google, until I got here. So it was a transition. And yeah, so like that's the how, but like the why, it's frankly because I need more money, and I need to be able to eat. I need to be able to put food on the table, and for a little while, put that guy through med school.
Wait, did you say you want to go to med school?
I was trying to put that guy through med school.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like you never know where things are going to take you, and like what opportunities are going to come up, and like what opportunities are going to arrive in doing that. So looking back, what was the like opportunity that like came up onto your plate that you were surprised that has had the most effect on your career so far?
I mean, I've been thinking about it, and it like actually, I don't know if you guys have realized it. I was born and brought up in India. And so the biggest, I think the most drastic step that I took was, I grew up in small town India, and like there were like two career options that were always provided to us, is like either you be a doctor or an engineer. And like I just couldn't see myself fit into either of the roles. And I also just like craved to be in a world so drastically different than the one that I'd come for. And so I started researching all these like hippy dippy liberal arts colleges on the East Coast in the US. And like my parents were like, that's whack. Like we can't afford to pay for all this. Like it's not gonna happen. Like stop having this dream. And then my dad just gave me like $50, and I like applied to the wackiest college that I could think of. And the wildest thing happened. I got in, and I got like a scholarship and financial aid. And somehow my parents agreed. And I think like that's when like the big radical change happened for me, or the thing that changed like the way where I was going to end up, is that I moved from like small town India, where to US. And what happened was, the switch was that how people saw me and how I saw myself changed like so fast, where I came from a place where I was the majority. I was like Hindi speaking. I was like in a part of the country where everything, the mainstream, were people like me. And then suddenly I moved to US, to Western Massachusetts, and I encountered the term woman of color, which was bewildering for me. I was like, where is that term woman or white? Like it doesn't exist because it's the default. And so like that sort of started finding its way in kind of like these hyphenated identities we create for ourselves, or like are not, we don't necessarily create for ourselves, are created for us. And like people who live in these liminal spaces or occupy margins of our society, they started becoming central to like the films I was making, or the TV shows I wanted to work on, or like the writing I was doing. And I think like just like kind of constantly trying to tell stories like that became something that I think somebody asked like how did Google find me, is because I was telling these stories, and I was like writing, I was making films that were in multiple languages, were for a global audience, were not necessarily just for like, you know, like US white like audience. It was like a range. So like that's what they wanted for the AI as well, and kind of like helped them discover my work. And I think the choice of kind of like leaving the world that was comfortable and I knew really well, and also like a path that like so many people around me were taking, like I just like decided not to go that route. That kind of opened all these other opportunities for me. It was like horribly scary, and definitely there were times where I was just like, I'm gonna like be homeless. But yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's just kind of taking like having like having a belief system in what you want to do, and having the courage to do it, and then having something that's very unique to say also. And I think like just these experiences gave me a point of view that was very distinct and made me stand out from others in
Yeah.
the work that I was doing.
Do you ever find that that vulnerability and that risk, like trying to balance that, like is it sometimes like a an attribute, and sometimes you're not sure if it's a detriment, and like trying to like navigate that, and like, you know, in the industry or just in general?
I mean, I now I've realized it after like many years in this, or just like being an older person now, is that we all suffer from imposter syndrome. It's just like of
Mhm.
like every day. Like when I joined Google, I was just like, am I supposed to be here? Like they just left me with like all this stuff. I'm gonna break Google right now. So like, you know, so it's like it's kind of like something that you have to come to terms with all, and it's like a push and a pull, you know. It's like that, like that external validation you seek, and the like the push that you like really try to win other people over, versus realizing that like, you know, I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing my best, and in a sustainable way. Something I want to talk to you, Nikki, about this as well. I feel like just both of us are women of color, and I feel like sometimes like I've learned this on the way, that I don't have to push myself to prove my worth. I have to do it in a sustainable way. So like I'm doing my
Yes.
best, but in a way that I don't kill myself over it. Like how has your experience been with that?
Oh, I mean, I think when I was more junior in my career and when I was younger, I was grinding myself into a pace to constantly prove myself. I was up late. I was like strategically sending emails at like midnight to be like, see, I'm a hard worker. And I was never taking vacation to be like, I'm always here. See, like I've earned my place. I deserve to be here. And like, you know, like because I was walking to a room, and of course, like the man in the room, he deserved to be here. Of course he belonged here. But me, I would get credential checked, and I'd be like, no, here's my list of credentials. Here's why, you know, despite coming from a non-traditional background, my degree's in communication, my background's in education. I learned on the job how to do this. So like, no, see, like I belong here. I swear. Despite I jumped through the same interview hoops. I have published all the same papers. I've done all the things. Of course, just by virtue of my being in the room means I belong in the room. So like I was grinding myself into a pace to try and prove myself. And now, only now am I learning that I don't have to do that. I think by admitting where my knowledge ends and like recognizing that, do I get to sit in my expertise? So I get to say, like, this is what I know. Here, this space, I'm an expert here. And so that's why I'm in the room. I don't know this. I'm going to ask you questions about that. I recognize that. I will admit that I don't know this, and you're the expert here. And so I'm going to let you own this. But here, don't come at me here. I know this. I'm the expert here. So here, that's why I'm in the room. We have complementary skills, and I'm going to be very confident in the small area and acknowledge and have humility everywhere else. I think recognizing that and letting other people see that has actually increased my confidence and increased my credibility with other people, and has made people respect me more, and allowed me to earn that respect more easily. And when I'm going into new spaces, when I'm going into spaces where, you know, I'm speaking to VPs and presenting, like I've had to present to Sundar, and, you know, Sundar's not the education expert, I am. And so, you know, I'm going to go like, here's my recommendation to you in this space. You're the expert in this, but I'm the expert here. And so like knowing the limits and bounds of your knowledge versus trying to be like studying all night so that I know everything. I'm the mind reader and I covered all the areas, because you just can't do that. You don't have the time, the space, the energy to do that. And like, but when I was more junior, I would try, because otherwise I was worried that they would recognize that I don't belong here. And like, if I didn't have the answer to every single question, they would assume that I didn't have the answer to any questions. And so trying to find that balance has been really challenging. And it's only taken, I don't know, like 20 something years to figure this out.
It's a constant. Imposter syndrome will rear its ugly head any moment. Like when you least figure, like, you know, when you're just like, oh, I totally got this. And then you're just like, oh, I'm supposed to.
Especially when we're arriving from outside the industry. You know, we're not traditional tech people. We're not, you know, like we don't fit the standard mold of what is expected. You know, what is, you know, when you Google search, interesting. And this is something that in the, you know, fairness and ethics realm, we are actively trying to fight. But like when you search, what does a software engineer look like? What does a tech person look like? The first searches don't look like us. That's not what, you know, that's not what the prototypical mold looks like. And so we have decades of unconscious bias working against us. So, you know, like, what do you think worked really well outside the industry, worked really well outside of your job, that we should be trying to adopt it at Google or at, you know, in the industry?
That's that's a really tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, like my journey is like kind of unique in that way, but like I for me, it's just, I'm just the kind of person, like if I don't feel like 100% about something, it's gonna show. And like, so like doing what I know really well and doing it well is kind of, I think it's brought me, or like what I'm passionate about too, is like something that's gonna get you out of bed every day, and you're gonna do it like, despite, like for the longest time, like there was no money in in the film work that I was doing, you know, so like that'll keep you going no matter what. So it's just like, I guess like enjoying what you're doing, because even like money is really important, but in the long run, if it's like making you miserable, like the money's gonna make you miserable.
Not worth it.
Yeah,
it's not worth it. Like, that's the thing, is like, you know, money is helpful in getting that security and stability, and like and like overcoming that like economic anxiety, but at a certain point, it, like, you have to balance that out, because like the number of times I've thought about quitting my job and going back to teaching is very high. It's very, very, very high. But then I remember what teaching 36 seventh graders at once was like.
I think people have been asking questions on the side, and then I think like let's, or like people can just jump in. Like, Nabila, what do you think is the best way to do this? Because like we've been asking each other questions, but I've been seeing some questions pop up on the side as well.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of compliments, positive notes. So
we are such weirdo goofballs that like I appreciate it.
So one recent one I'm seeing from Gabriella is, how did you both find a community when you entered in industry? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard. I'll admit it's hard. At first, you're battling against imposter syndrome. You're battling against the fact that just there aren't very many, like at least it's getting better. I will fully 100% admit there are more and more women entering the industry every single day, and etc. It wasn't like that, 10 years ago. But there are things like employee resource groups. There's a tool inside of Google called Lunch Ninja where they will randomly, like you put in your interest and it will randomly assign you someone. So like those things didn't exist before, but it takes a bit of humility and a little bit of vulnerability to just introduce yourself, and like seeking mentorship groups and like seeking out a mentor and seeking out that connection is really, really great, because my mentor then introduced me to another person, and like being intentional about building a social network is hard, and like not thinking about like, ooh, networking, I'm going to pass out my business card and that's how I'm going to do it. But like, just asking people like, oh, what do you do? And how is that connected to what I do? And like, I just want to learn, and like being open to that, I think has been so interesting, because like I guarantee that as I work on my education things, I'm going to like ping Arpita and be like, what is your thoughts on this? How, like you're a storyteller. Am I like, do you have any feedback for me? And like asking for feedback. Like I've only met her. We didn't know each other before this. So like, but I'm forever going to know who she is, and like, and seek her advice and feedback.
Same. I mean, the other, you're so good. I love you, Nikki. Anyways, the one thing I was thinking about that has like surprisingly been an amazing community that I didn't like. I became a mom like now it's okay. My toddler turned 3, so it's not recent. It's been a while, but there's an amazing mothers group at Google, which is not just like focused on like how to navigate being a mom and working full time. It's been amazing resource during the pandemic, but also like they talk about everything in the world, like how to like navigate tough work situations, like finding like how to find a daycare in the area that you're living, like how to like figure out your taxes, like everything in the world. And like I would not like I've learned to adult because of that group, and it's just been like a community that is like women who are moms who are also working in tech, like and it's just been such a great resource for me in like navigating this new space, because I was just like, what am I to do now? So yeah, I mean, so it's like also sometimes like you find community in the places like you didn't expect, and it's just been amazing.
There's a fun like board games group, and there's a fun like, of course there's like the Asian Googlers community, and there's like the moms community, and of course like there's like very like affinity, and identity groups. But then there's like, yeah, like fun groups like the cycling group and other groups. So like I think it's just putting yourself out there and being willing to like give it a shot. I think that's a really big part of it. But I don't know, I'm from Seattle, or I'm living in Seattle now. I'm from San Diego. But I'm living in Seattle now, and like we have something called the Seattle Freeze, where they say like people in Seattle will be nice to you, but they won't be kind to you, because they'll yeah, so they'll be like, oh, like, oh, I'm sorry you're cold, but they won't offer you a jacket or something. Like that's the thing, is like they'll be nice to you on the surface, but they won't go the extra mile. And like it's so hard to build community and connection in Seattle that we have a name for it. They call it the Seattle Freeze. So they'll be nice to you on the surface, and like, so it's hard to like open yourself and ask for like friendship and like that stuff in Seattle. So I don't know, it's hard. I don't know what else to say. It's hard.
So we got a few other questions from Natalie. What advice would you give to those women of color who are recently entering the tech industry?
You
don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. Also, like, for me, it's like a lot of times I see it as kind of like a superpower that like we are, we are people who have had an experience that's very different from a lot of people in tech. And it's a voice that you can use to advocate for building more inclusive products, So like one of the big things that I do very actively on my team is to make sure that we build products that are for everyone, not just like tech savvy people. So one of the biggest projects I worked on when I joined Google was to build the AI for people in parts of the world where people had literacy challenges. So they couldn't read and write. And so how do they access the internet if they can't read and write? So voice becomes the gateway to internet and information. So they talk to, they like basically they have these like phones, like very basic phones, those Nokia phones we had in like 2001 with the Snake game on, like it's like those kind of phones where they just press a button and say okay Google, and the Google Assistant pops up. But the Google Assistant understands the language that they're speaking. So if it's in Indonesia, it's Bhasha Indonesia. If it's in like North India, it's Hindi, and then people can ask the assistant questions they have, and she like searches the internet and provides the information they need. Or like, they searches the right video for them. And like,
I want that for my grandma.
I know. So it's like, that is like, advocating for users who cannot read and write, but still they need to figure out like, where can they go buy seeds for like a particular kind of crop that they want to grow. Like that's like how the Google Assistant can be helpful for them, and like make information accessible to everyone in the world. That's kind of like the mission, and it aligns with it. So like to advocate, like, because I am like, I mean, I grew up in that part of the world and I have kind of like experienced a lot of that. I could advocate for users, who might not necessarily have access to internet otherwise. So that's like it's kind of like a superpower in a way. So I would like,
I 100% echo that. I 100% echo that, because, I think a lot of the initial instinct is to dull that part of yourself and to shave that part of yourself down to fit in more. And like, I think it's the exact opposite, especially now as this is being recognized. It's the exact opposite, is that you have experiences that are unique and can add value. We talk about, it's not culture fit, it's culture add. How do you add, you bring a unique and additional perspective that no one else has. So like, it's something that is special. We were talking about a skill proficiency, and like, a couple of the male product managers were saying, you could be listed as a study buddy, and he's like, this person will show up as an expert in this topic, and a novice in this topic, and a beginner in this topic. And I was like, wait, so you are going to rank other people by their expertise? Like, women are less likely to self-nominate themselves as an expert. So what you're doing is creating or reinforcing a system of unfair bias, where men are going to be continually elevated as experts and women are going to be seen as not experts. And that social gap is just going to continue to widen. Like, you didn't even think about that. Like, because you don't have the lived experience, like you didn't even consider that. You didn't even think about it. Like, here's some feedback. Did you consider that? Like, maybe you should come up with different labels, or rethink, do we even need to be labeling people by their experience for this feature to be effective? And you being a woman, or a woman of color, or a person of color could be adding that and like really making a difference. And that is a really big deal.
There is thank you, Nikki. There is a follow-up on the previous question from Bibi. So women of color and older, any advice for us that are now coming into tech space?
I think
for older.
Yeah,
so
I think we've hit on some of the women of color thing. For older women, I think there's an implicit bias. We're just going to call it out. There's an implicit bias around older people in the industry, but again, it's finding out where does your experience and your knowledge add value, and your like, where do you have special knowledge that other people don't, like there are fields where or experiences that just because you're older, you have insights that these side part skinny jean hating Gen Zers just don't know about. COBOL programmers are making buku bucks right now because mainframe computers are on COBOL systems that are being deprecated. And so, the most highly paid people are these engineers who are coming out of retirement in their literally 70s. And so like they have experiences that are unique and special. So, what are your experiences? What is your specialized knowledge that is unique and special that you can contribute? I think, especially if you're returning from like, parental leave or being out of the industry for a few years, you have insights that other people don't, and like turning that into something that is contributory and like and shining a light on that in particular versus like, oh, trying to downplay the fact that you've been out of industry. Is like, no, like because I haven't been in the industry, I have this additional perspective that you don't have, and this is how it's an asset back to you.
The other thing, like, I mean, 200% agree with Nikki. The other thing is that, we all know that we have ways to go before we create equitable workspaces and respectful workplaces. Like that's been a challenge, and it's an uphill battle sometimes. And that's something that's like sometimes really out of our control, like how someone views us, like, or how they like the implicit bias they have. And in those situations, I'm like, I try, like, and it's like such a struggle for me, but I try to tell myself that like I can't, the only thing I can control here is like my reaction or like what I can do about this situation. And then it just comes down to doing the best in like, as Nikki said, in my expertise, or doing the best of what I do. And again, doing it in a sustainable way so that I don't burn out, so like maintain that work-life balance. And I mean, your work will rise, and I mean, not everyone is there to put us down or like, so that you will have your opportunity and you will kind of rise. So it's just kind of like recognizing also that all in such situations one can control is like doing the best you can.
Thank you. So one reminder for everyone is to fill out the session survey from the Whova app. Give feedback for this talk. And there was another question. Okay. So from Paula, what programming coding skills do you use in your current positions?
Zero. I don't code or program at all. I just write.
Sometimes it's been years. So I'm in management now. I have my staff do it for me. So that's not my responsibility anymore, but I used to use some JavaScript very, very poorly, I will really admit. And it was more around like SQL and R. So, again, I work in like analysis. So it was really around like data science and data analysis. So I manage a team of tech writers, data scientists, UX researchers, and then software engineers. And so I have grown my team into a bunch of specialists. My team, it's really like my role in the team is to make sure that they have the time, the resources, the information, the context, the knowledge to be successful, and to define and like understand the problem space so that they can do that. So day to day, I don't code at all. So like it is very like transitioning to the tech industry does not mean you have to code. It does not mean you have to have coding skills at all. There's so much to do in the tech industry without that. There's program management, there's technical program management, there's product management, there's working in marketing, there's working in writing, like Arpita does. There's a wide range of skills required to make a tech company successful, aside from software engineering.
Thank you. So another question from Natalie. What is something you wished you knew before that you learned during your time in the tech industry?
I'm ashamed to say this. It took me a really long time. But like, it's all about like kind of people skills, like people are people. And no matter like, that they're in tech or film or education or like your daycare teacher, it's all about like kind of building that rapport and personal relationship and listening to what the other person is saying and like kind of having a sort of bringing empathy to it. And that kind of like really kind of changes a lot of like situations and like it really gets rid of a lot of friction. And it's just like such a basic thing where like it's taken me a while to be like, it's just like, despite like having like the big titles and everything, and at the end of it, it's just a person behind there, and all they want to do is have a pleasant experience while working with you, or like, getting whatever they want done or being heard. That's like really important too. So yeah, and I mean, I've noticed in like in film, like where, like there's just like sometimes really big egotistical people, like big stars involved. At the end of the day, what the star wants is just to be seen, and they just want to be heard and like addressing that.
Yeah.
So it's just like
Make me feel important.
Yeah.
And
Make me feel
valued.
heard. I have an opinion. I want to be heard. Like even like, yeah, and that like kind of like makes working in any space easier, is just like acknowledging that there's just a person on the other side.
Yeah, I think that is going to be critical no matter the industry, no matter what you're doing. But if you're really determined to transition into the industry and like be intentional about it, like I do a lot of hiring, I do a lot of like resume like courses and etc. So like if you're determined to transition into this tech industry, my one tip is to look at your resumes and to really, really reevaluate what your resumes are doing and how they're doing it. So like, how are you communicating your skills in your resume? So like, think about the impact of what you're doing and how that's communicating. So like, not just like, oh, I manage the budget, but how much of that budget are you managing? And what does that budget do? So that's my one like super tactical hands-on tip of like, if you want to transition in this industry, that is just something about how this industry communicates, using some numbers and the impact of what you're doing to communicate is going to just give your resume a slight edge. That's just like a super directive.
Sure. Just one more question because we have just 2 minutes. From Uma Krishnan, what do you see yourself doing in next role, or what do you see yourself doing in your next role? How do you make time to explore that while in your current role?
I'm actually, it's been a rough year for me because I have also like a small kid and like I'm also working full time. So to be honest, I have not had time to explore what I would like to do next. I'm just kind of like living in the moment and making it work for myself. But I mean, I would continue wanting to like make products that are inclusive, that are for everybody, and technology that's for everybody, and tell stories where, we put in the center someone who lives on the margins and we like see the world through their eyes. So that's what I would like to continue doing. But in terms of finding time for doing that, I haven't had that.
Yeah, I don't know. In my next role, I mean, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about my next role, and I want my next role to be strategic and building an organization and building an organization that is inclusive and intentional about like doing that and like solving hard problems. That's all I want to do is I want to find hard problems and think of creative ways to solve that. So like, how do I make time to explore that is I find hard problems in my current role and I find ways to solve it now. And then I think about how does that, like, how does that apply to the bigger and larger business? And so I'm constantly trying to tackle something bigger and like take on more responsibility in doing that. So yeah, like my team just went from like 4 people to 7 people, and I'm hiring 2 more people on my team. 2 more people I'm hiring. So yeah, I'm constantly looking to grow and advocate and do more. And like I have too much on my plate. So yeah, I need to take my own advice about work-life balance.
That's so funny. I used to lead a team of 10 writers, and I've gone the other route where I'm just like, I don't want to manage and lead big teams. Like it's just like
we're in the middle performance review season, and I'm like having to write all the performance review notes, and I'm like, why do I do this? This is a terrible idea. But like it's the closest I get to teaching anymore. Like this coaching and this mentoring that I do, it's the closest I get to teaching anymore. So I'm like, oh, I do miss it. No, I don't miss it. This is the bureaucracy. It's the worst thing I do. So I'm like, I can't make up my mind. That's the thing. It's like it changes every single day. And like that's the wonderful thing about being human is like you're allowed to change your mind. And like
so,
I could
sorry to interrupt, Nikki. So almost out of time. So any last word? Otherwise, I think
do you have any takeaway for the attendee? Something that you want them to really take away from the session? I'm sure they took a lot, but like last word that you would like to share with them, please.
I mean, thank you for giving me this space and giving Nikki and I this opportunity to like talk to each other and to you guys. Yeah, I mean, I'm blank now.
I know. No, we appreciate everyone taking the time to talk to us and ask us questions and give us feedback. And yeah, like if you're interested in transitioning to the tech industry, like connect with us on LinkedIn and give it some thought, have some consideration, because there are a lot of options and a lot of pathways.
Thank you very much.
It was really nice meeting everybody.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
thank you.
Bye.